The middle class in the United States is steadily declining. Key trends include a shrinking percentage of middle-class jobs, a significant drop in the wealth of typical American households, and a steady decline in home ownership rates as household costs have exploded across the country. Millions of middle-class families are now struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living. This crisis in the erosion of the U.S. middle class is not receiving adequate attention, and the provided statistics aim to demonstrate this alarming trend beyond any doubt. Here are 30 facts to demonstrate to anyone who doubts that the middle class is being eroded. 30. According to a new CNBC and Momentum Workforce survey, a significant majority of American workers, shown percent, are struggling with the impacts of inflation, reporting that it has outpaced any salary gains they've made in the past 12 months. This indicates that the purchasing power of workers' wages has declined, as the rising cost of goods and services has eroded the value of their earnings. In contrast, only 19% of workers say that increases in their salary have about matched the rate of inflation, suggesting that their financial situation has remained relatively stable in the face of the current economic conditions. 29. In May, 11.1% of middle-class Americans said they're likely to miss at least one debt payment over the next 3 months, according to Federal Reserve data. This is an alarming statistic, indicating that over 1 in 10 middle-class households are at risk of falling behind on their financial obligations in the near future. The inability to make timely payments can have severe consequences, including damaged credit scores, late fees, and potential legal action from creditors. 28. Inflation has actually been squeezing the middle class for decades, but official numbers mask this reality. For instance, everyday expenses for middle and low-income families rose 40% beyond what the Consumer Price Index, CPI, would indicate. This means that the true cost of living for these households has been increasing at a much faster rate than the government's primary inflation metric suggests. As a result, the gains in income and purchasing power that middle-class workers have experienced have been more than wiped out by the disproportionate rise in their daily expenses, leaving them with less real spending power and a diminished standard of living. Furthermore, the CPI is widely criticized for not accurately reflecting the spending patterns and priorities of middle-class and low-income households. The index often fails to adequately capture the increased costs of essential goods and services that make up a larger portion of these households' budgets, such as housing, healthcare, and education. This disconnect between the official inflation rate and the real-world experiences of the middle class has made it increasingly difficult for them to maintain their financial stability and quality of life. 27. Another international report pointed out that 40% of middle-class Americans said they are very or moderately worried about not having enough money to pay their monthly bills. This highlights the significant financial strain and uncertainty that a large portion of the middle class is facing. With essentials like housing, utilities, and groceries becoming increasingly unaffordable, many middle-class families are struggling to make ends meet each month. 26. The growing economic pessimism in the United States is further evidenced by the Gallup's Economic Confidence Index, which has been steadily declining. Last month, the index measured a concerning -45, down from -39 in the previous 2 months. This is the lowest reading since the tail end of the Great Recession in early 2009, reflecting the depth of the uncertainty and concern that Americans are feeling about the state of the economy. 25. The survey also found that a significant proportion of middle-class workers, 38%, reported being worse off financially in April 2024 compared to the same time last year. This 6.5% increase in the number of middle-class workers feeling financially worse off is a troubling indicator of the growing economic challenges facing this segment of the population. 24. The survey highlighted that the rising cost of living is the primary reason why middle-class workers are feeling financially worse off. Approximately one-third, or 35%, of those who reported being in a worse financial position than a year ago attributed this to the increasing prices of goods and services. This suggests that the erosion of purchasing power due to inflation is having a disproportionate impact on the middle class, as their wages struggle to keep pace with the rising cost of living. 23. According to the National Institute on Retirement Security, a staggering 62% of middle-class Americans are deeply worried about not having enough savings to sustain themselves in retirement. Tyler Bond, the Institute's research manager, painted a grim picture, stating that the U.S. can no longer afford to provide a comfortable and secure retirement for its citizens. 22. Middle-class Americans are facing a stark reality of economic inequality, with the ownership of financial assets highly concentrated among the wealthy elite. Bond's sobering assessment highlights the growing divide between the haves and the have-nots, as the middle class struggles to keep up. 21. The current retirement system, heavily reliant on individual ownership of financial assets in 401k accounts, has placed an immense burden on middle-class Americans. During their working years, they are struggling to accumulate sufficient financial assets to secure a comfortable retirement. This means that the retirement outlook for many in the middle class is bleak at best, with the dream of a secure and peaceful golden years slipping further out of reach. 20. In stark contrast to the wealth accumulation of the top earners, the bottom 90% of all Americans have collectively seen only a meager 15.9% of all income growth over the same period. This stark disparity highlights the widening economic divide, where the benefits of economic growth have disproportionately favored the wealthiest segments of society, leaving the middle class and lower-income individuals behind. 19. The burden of student loan debt is disproportionately felt by the middle class in the United States. According to data from the Federal Reserve, middle-class Americans, defined as those with household incomes between $50,000 and $99,900, hold approximately 60% of the total outstanding public student loan debt. This significant share highlights the financial strain that higher education costs have placed on the middle class, often seen as the backbone of the American economy. 18. The rising cost of raising a child in the United States has also placed a significant financial burden on middle-class families. A recent report, published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, found that when adjusting for the 2024 inflation rate, the estimated cost of raising a child from birth through age 17 in a middle-class family with 2 working adults is almost $286,000. This staggering figure reflects the increasing expenses associated with providing for a child's basic needs, education, healthcare, and other essential services. The report underscores the financial challenges faced by middle-class families as they navigate the ever-increasing costs of raising a child in the current economic climate. The combination of substantial student loan debt and the high cost of raising a child has placed immense financial pressure on the middle class, making it increasingly difficult for these families to achieve financial stability and security. Policymakers and stakeholders must address these issues to ensure that the middle class, a vital segment of the American population, is not disproportionately burdened by these economic realities. 17. According to a recent Gallup poll, between May 2023 and May 2024, there was a significant 10% decline in the number of middle-class Americans who rated their financial situation as good or satisfactory. This drop indicates a growing sense of economic insecurity and financial strain among the middle class, who have historically been considered the backbone of the American economy. 16. A report released by the prominent financial institution Wells Fargo further highlighted the challenges faced by middle-income Americans. The report revealed that this demographic is especially feeling the negative impact of rising living expenses over the past year, with the cost of essential goods and services, such as housing, healthcare, and groceries, steadily increasing. Middle-income families are finding it increasingly difficult to maintain their standard of living and make ends meet. The report also noted that in January, the bank observed that middle-class consumers are feeling the biggest squeeze from the effects of inflation. Specifically, the report found that inflation rates were half a point higher for the middle-income group compared to those at both the highest and lowest ends of the income spectrum. This disproportionate impact on the middle class suggests that this group is bearing a greater burden of the current economic challenges faced by the country. The combination of the Gallup poll findings and the Wells Fargo report paints a concerning picture of the financial hardships confronting the middle class in the United States. As the cost of living continues to rise at a rate that outpaces income growth, the sense of economic security and stability that has long defined the middle class appears to be eroding, with potentially far-reaching consequences for the broader economy and social fabric of the nation. 15. Even the wealthiest individuals in the United States are finding it increasingly difficult to make ends meet. Lending Club, a leading financial technology company, reported that more than one-third, or 36%, of paycheck-to-paycheck consumers in the U.S. earn at least $250,000 a year. This startling statistic suggests that the relentless rise in the cost of living is affecting how Americans of all income levels manage their household budgets. Despite the perception that the wealthy are immune to the financial pressures faced by the general population, the data paints a very different picture. Inflation, driven by a combination of factors such as supply chain disruptions, the war in Ukraine, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, has eroded the purchasing power of the dollar, making it increasingly difficult for even the highest-earning individuals to maintain their standard of living. 14. The findings of the Pew Research Center further highlight the growing wealth inequality in the United States. Over the past 10 years, the richest 5% of Americans saw their median wealth increase by a staggering 88%. This rate of increase is nearly 3 times the rate experienced by the middle class, underscoring the widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. This disparity is deeply concerning as it threatens the very foundations of the American dream, the belief that hard work and perseverance can lead to financial stability and upward mobility. As the costs of essential goods and services continue to rise, the ability of the middle class to accumulate wealth and build a secure financial future is becoming increasingly elusive. The fact that even the wealthiest individuals are struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living highlights the urgent need for policymakers to address the underlying causes of inflation and implement strategies to promote economic stability and equity for all Americans, regardless of their income level. 13. Another striking example of the growing housing affordability crisis is that between 2001 and 2024, rents skyrocketed by an astonishing 150% across the United States. This dramatic surge in rental costs has far outpaced the official measure of housing costs, which only grew by a mere 54% during the same time period. This disparity highlights just how quickly the housing landscape has shifted, leaving many families struggling to keep up with rapidly escalating rents. 12. As housing prices continue to soar to unprecedented levels, the middle class is increasingly being priced out of homeownership. Households with median annual incomes of $100,000 can now only afford to purchase homes in a mere 36% of the country's housing markets, where the typical home value is below $428,700. And this is assuming that these middle-class families already have a substantial 20% down payment saved up, a significant financial hurdle in itself. Troublingly, this means that the middle class is now effectively locked out of a staggering 64% of all housing markets nationwide. According to data compiled by Black Knight, a leading mortgage technology and analytics firm. 11. To further illustrate the growing financial strain on the middle class, consider that in 2001, a typical two-income middle-class family would have had, on average, an extra $4,000 remaining after covering their basic living expenses. However, a recent study conducted by the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity, LICEP, reveals that today, that same middle-class family would now have to go $2,000 into debt just to sustain a very modest lifestyle. This dramatic reversal of financial fortunes underscores the significant deterioration in the middle class's purchasing power and overall economic security in the face of skyrocketing housing costs and other rising expenses. 10. According to a recent survey conducted by the Conference Board, a respected non-profit research organization, a significant portion of middle-class workers, primarily professionals and office employees, have expressed concerns about their ability to keep up with the rising cost of living. The survey found that just under two-thirds, or approximately 61.8% of these workers, are worried that their current pay will not be able to match the rate of inflation they are experiencing this year. 9. The economic challenges facing American workers have reached a critical juncture, as evidenced by a survey published by CNBC. The data reveals that a staggering 28% of all U.S. workers now consider themselves to be underpaid, marking an all-time high in this metric. This stark statistic underscores the growing financial pressures and sense of wage stagnation felt by a substantial segment of the American workforce. 8. Furthermore, the same CNBC survey uncovered an alarming trend among U.S. workers, with around 39% of respondents indicating that they have seriously considered quitting their jobs within the past 3 months. This figure represents the highest level on record, a significant increase of 6% from the previous November. This data suggests that a significant number of workers are feeling increasingly dissatisfied with their current employment situations, potentially leading to a surge in voluntary resignations and workforce turnover. The combination of widespread concerns about inflation's impact on purchasing power, a growing sense of being underpaid, and a rise in job resignation considerations highlights the complex economic challenges facing the American workforce. These findings underscore the need for policymakers, employers, and economists to closely examine the factors contributing to these trends and to develop strategies that can address the financial well-being and job satisfaction of workers across various sectors and income levels. 7. A recent report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York has highlighted a concerning trend in the American economy. The report warns that the middle-class consumer base, which has historically been the driving force behind the country's economic growth, is rapidly eroding. Over the past 3 decades, the rate of middle-class jobs has shrunk from 76% to just 64% of the overall U.S. workforce. This shift has profound implications for the stability and long-term prosperity of the American economy. The middle class has traditionally been the backbone of consumer demand, fueling economic activity through their purchasing power and creating a vibrant, self-sustaining cycle of growth. As this foundation crumbles, the report suggests that the economy may struggle to maintain its momentum and resilience. 6. The report also sheds light on the changing nature of the American workforce. In the 1960s, nearly all prime-age men with a high school diploma were employed. But today, that number has dropped to just 85%. This dramatic decline in workforce participation among this demographic group is particularly concerning, as it speaks to deeper structural issues within the economy. Furthermore, the report notes that between 1973 and 2015, real hourly earnings for this group of workers have fallen by a significant 18%. This erosion of purchasing power, coupled with the shrinking of middle-class jobs, paints a troubling picture of the economic challenges facing a large segment of the American population. The findings of this report serve as a stark warning that the traditional pillars of the American economy may be in jeopardy. Policymakers and economic leaders must now grapple with the complex task of addressing these trends and reinvigorating the middle class, which remains essential for the continued prosperity and resilience of the nation. 5. On the flip side, more than 12.5 million children in the U.S. live in poverty, facing significant challenges and barriers to their well-being and development. These children often lack access to basic necessities, such as adequate food, clothing, housing, and healthcare, which can have far-reaching consequences on their physical, mental, and emotional health. 4. It is hard to believe, but 1 out of every 6 children in the United States is living in poverty in 2024. New data from the Center on Poverty and Social Policy at Columbia University reveals the stark reality of child poverty in the world's wealthiest nation. This alarming statistic highlights the persistent and pervasive nature of economic inequality, as millions of young Americans are deprived of the resources and opportunities necessary to thrive and reach their full potential. The issue of child poverty is not only a moral concern, but also a pressing societal challenge with far-reaching implications. Children growing up in poverty are more likely to experience a range of negative outcomes, including poorer educational attainment, higher rates of physical and mental health problems, and increased risk of involvement in the criminal justice system. Addressing this crisis requires a comprehensive and multifaceted approach, involving targeted investments in social safety net programs, affordable housing initiatives, quality education, and job creation efforts to lift families out of poverty and provide children with the support they need to succeed. 3. In a May survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, a staggering 93% of respondents expressed that inflation was a very serious issue facing the country in 2024. This overwhelming sentiment underscores the profound impact that skyrocketing prices have had on the daily lives of Americans across the nation. The survey findings reflect the deep and widespread concern among the populace as they grapple with the relentless surge in the costs of essential goods and services, from fuel and food to housing and other necessities. 2. The soaring prices have created an extremely disquieting situation for Americans, particularly those living paycheck to paycheck. Despite recent wage gains, a Lending Club survey revealed that a staggering 64% of the entire U.S. population was living paycheck to paycheck as of March 2024. This means that over 2/3 of the country's residents reportedly had little to no financial cushion at the end of each month after covering their expenses. The stark reality is that the majority of Americans are facing immense financial pressure and struggles to make ends meet in the face of the ongoing inflationary crisis. 1. The profound financial hardships experienced by a significant portion of the population are further underscored by the alarming statistic that there are 1.3 million homeless public school children in the United States, as reported by the National Center for Homeless Education. This troubling figure stands in stark contrast to the notion of a thriving middle class, and it serves as a poignant reminder of the harsh realities facing countless families across the country. The prevalence of homelessness, even among children, is a testament to the urgent need to address the root causes of financial instability and ensure that all members of society have access to the resources and support necessary to maintain a decent standard of living. The statistics highlighted in this report paint a sobering picture of the state of the American middle class. From the erosion of middle-class jobs and income stagnation to the alarming levels of child poverty and inflation concerns, these figures underscore a severe and systemic challenge facing the nation. The current trajectory, if unaddressed, threatens the economic fabric and long-term prosperity of the United States. Policymakers community leaders, and society as a whole must take concerted action to reverse these troubling trends. Restoring the vitality of the middle class requires a holistic approach, involving bolstering educational opportunities, enhancing workforce participation, and implementing equitable economic policies. Only through such comprehensive efforts can the nation hope to rebuild a robust, inclusive, and resilient economy that benefits all Americans.